In 2024, an average of 6 animals faced suffering or death daily, and these are only the ones reported.
First-time offenders can be fined up to $15,000 and/or imprisoned up to 18 months, and subsequent offences will yield a penalty of up to $30,000 fine and/or imprisonment up to 3 years. Cases of animal cruelty tend to stir up conversations online regarding the current laws we have against such cases and what more can be done to prevent them. Back in 2023, then MP Louis Ng asked for an increase in jail term for acts of animal abuse. Though the penalties have not changed since, the AVS and NParks have been reviewing current laws and regulations and said that they are engaged in discussions with animal welfare groups about the current situation. With recent high-profile cases once again shocking Singaporeans, what more can we do to safeguard our animals? Let's have a chat with SPCA to find out more.
So here at SPCA, what kind of abuse cases do you most commonly see or deal with?
In 2024, about half of our welfare and neglect cases had to do with dissatisfactory living conditions. This was followed by high-rise syndrome, which is where pets fall from height due to the owner's failure to secure the home. Then for intentional cruelty, abandonment was the most common form, followed by physical abuse causing an animal's death, inhumane trapping, so the use of glue traps, and then we have hit and runs, as well as exposure to aversive training methods. The SPCA sees only a subset of all the cases. Some cases get referred to other animal welfare organisations, while other cases may go unreported or simply unnoticed.
Now, it seems to me that there is a continuous rise in animal abuse cases. Why do you think that's the case?
We're still monitoring the situation and we cannot yet conclude any rise in animal abuse cases from 2024 to 2025, but even a single case is arguably one too many.
There has been some talk about the laws we have to protect animals. Does the SPCA participate in these discussions? Do you get a lot of feedback about it?
Following a high-profile case of animal abuse, whether it is suspected or confirmed, the SPCA tends to receive a surge in correspondence from members of the public who express their outrage or their dismay at the animal's suffering. They may urge the SPCA to intensify pressure on the authorities to implement stricter penalties and tighter enforcement in terms of animal protection. So in terms of lobbying the government to impose stricter penalties and tighter enforcement, this is something that the SPCA has been working on for many years.
Do you think the deterrence is sufficient or should more be done?
We believe that stronger legislation, more effective enforcement and harsher penalties are needed to punish perpetrators, as well as prevent new cases by serving as an effective deterrent. And importantly, the penalties that are meted out must consider the true cost of animal abuse, not just in monetary terms, but also in terms of the emotional and physical toll borne by your rescuers, your shelters, and your animal welfare organizations. So it's not sufficient to just amend the law to impose harsher penalties for animal abuse. Your offenders or your offenders-to-be must perceive a real prospect of getting caught and having those penalties enforced upon them. Otherwise, your law, no matter how strict it is on paper, may not have the intended deterrent effect.
I just want to clarify this with you. Can the SPCA impose any sort of punishment on abusers?
So the answer is no, and the reason is that the SPCA is a non-governmental animal welfare charity and we just simply do not have the legal powers to perform certain duties. A lot of people have the misconception that the SPCA is a place where you get to cuddle cute animals, and they are usually heartbroken when they realize that the reality is not a single animal at the SPCA wants to be here. They were either abused, injured, fell ill in the community, or they were abandoned by their owners. And all of them have painful stories to tell. It's not all joyful here, but we hope that we will be able to find joy in having them adopted by a loving family.
Sabrina, thank you so much for taking the time today to speak with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So that was really good hearing from the SPCA. Now let's go get the legal perspective from criminal lawyer Ramesh Tiwary. Hi, Mr. Tiwary.
Hello.
I'm Edward. Could you tell us briefly what this Animals and Birds Act covers?
My reading of the Act is that it's wide enough to basically cover any kind of cruelty. So things like ill-treating, torturing, but it's very, very wide. It's left that way for the judges to decide what amounts to cruelty.
In Singapore, the cases that bring up the largest degree of public interest are usually the ones that involve animals that are mostly kept as pets. For example, dogs and cats especially. Currently, the laws as they stand, they function sufficiently as a deterrent to people who may consider abusing animals.
My experience and my impression is that the law plays a twofold role. Of course, there must be punishment. Otherwise, what's the point of having an offense if it's not punished? But I think what has been particularly significant for Singapore and crime in Singapore, there's a certain degree of certainty that a person who commits a crime will be apprehended. I think that the fear of apprehension or the knowledge that our resources are strong enough to arrest people and punish them quickly, there's very little delay in our court system, that plays perhaps a more significant role in my mind than merely the sentence or the punishment.
But if we look at last year, 2024, the number of animal abuse cases reached a 12-year high, which I think is concerning for not just animal welfare groups, but I think the public in general. I would think that if the laws are not providing a means for which these cases to decrease, to prevent these cases, perhaps there is a need to review them.
I would take it slightly differently. I would say, and people have said this especially about animal abuse, how difficult it is to detect it. Because some of this happens behind closed doors. So it could be people who have actually bought a dog or bought a cat and then find themselves unable to take care of it. I think what we need to look at, instead of just looking at the sentencing, is to look at the enforcement. So setting up more cameras, for instance, is a cheap and viable alternative. What we need to teach people, and I'm not saying it's not happening, but I think we really need to instill this sense of responsibility that if you're going to take on an animal, then you take on the animal for the life of the animal.
There is this sort of disparity between the number of cases reported of animal abuse and the number of people actually being charged for it. So why aren't people being prosecuted?
I don't think that our police system or the Attorney General's chambers is lax or lenient to abusers. That is not the case. That's not my impression. But I think getting evidence is difficult. That society that we had 30, 40 years ago has just changed so drastically that if we see somebody doing something, we say, not my business. Or worse still, we take a video and put it up. I remember when I was a child and if I did something wrong, if my parent wasn't there, the neighbor was there.
To correct you?
Yes, or to report back, either one. As a society, every one of us is responsible.
Thank you very much, sir.
Most welcome, thank you.
So having harsher penalties and laws could possibly reduce the number of animal abuse cases, but it's also important for us to learn to be more respectful towards the animals that are around us and the pets who live with us.